Hello everyone, I am Chris. Welcome to the Bagmaker's Workroom. Today we're going to talk about that one thing that troubles everyone, and it's pricing. How much should we sell our bags for? There are a lot of aspects that go into pricing, and I hope that this video is going to help to make it all a little bit easier for you. So before we get started, welcome to my workroom. Okay, before we get started talking about the actual spreadsheet that I've developed to help determine what the price of a bag should be, we need to talk about costs. So there are two different types of costs that go into making a bag. You have direct costs, and those direct costs are all the items you see here. It's your actual fabrics, whatever you're going to use for the bag. It's going to be things like your hardware, whether you buy it in a kit or all separate. You're going to have your interfacings, you're going to have your stabilizers. All of these things are direct costs. So think about, if I make a bag, what goes into that bag, that's a direct cost. Then you have overhead costs. Overhead costs are the costs that do not go into the bag, but play into you actually making the bag. For instance, if you rent a spot, your rent is an overhead. Your utilities, your water, your gas, whatever it may be, is all overhead. Your time is overhead. If you have folks working for you, that's overhead. Your machines, the maintenance on your machines, all that is overhead. I even consider workroom supplies overhead, so things like double-sided tape, thread, rivets, things like that maybe do go into the construction of the bag, but they're so hard to measure because you're using such little bits of it. Those are the types of things that are harder to track, because that's going to depend on whether you make 100 bags in a year or 2 bags in a year, as to how much overhead actually gets applied to the cost of the bag. So the overhead we're going to talk about in a minute, and we'll deal with that when we look at our spreadsheets. Let's go back to direct costs for just a minute. When we purchase these costs, or when we purchase these items to put into the bag, we need to basically break down the cost into inches. So for instance, if you have some interfacing and your interfacing measures 45 inches across, and you end up buying 5 yards of it, but for the bag, you only use half of a yard of it. Well, you're not going to charge the full 5 yards of interfacing in your bag. You're only going to charge what you used. So the way to do that typically is to break it down by inch. You could do it by yard, but what happens a lot of times is you use partial yards. And so therefore it's usually easier universally to break it down by inch. So when you order your products, you need to know the width of the product and how much you're using. So the width is going to be, for instance, for cotton canvases, 60 inches wide. For interfacings, 45 inches wide. For cottons, 45 inches wide. Usually your faux, you're at 54 inches wide. So if you're not sure, unroll it, lay it out on your table, and measure it and figure out the width. Okay, then we need to figure out the height. And the height is going to be basically how much of that product you used. So faux leathers, vinyls, corks are going to come in a roll like this. Some rolls are 18 inches, some are 16, some are 12. So again, you need to know exactly what you ordered for that product, what you're using, and the total height of it, essentially. Sometimes these rolls also, instead of coming in 54 inches, maybe they only come in 52 inches. So the thing to do is when you get your products in, before you do anything with them, measure them out, either write it down somewhere, either in some kind of spreadsheet or on a piece of paper if that's easier for you, as to the length, the width, and how much you paid for it. A lot of times the actual stabilizers come in other widths than 45 or 60. For instance, this stabilizer that I get on a roll comes in 36 inches. 36 inches wide. So that's step one, is you have to know how much you've paid for a product and how much you purchased of that product, length and width. And then from there, once you know that, hopefully what I'm about to show you is going to make it all a lot easier. Okay, we have here a spreadsheet that I've developed that I complete every time that I do a bag, make a bag. And this spreadsheet helps me determine exactly how much I need to charge for the bag. So there's two tabs on the spreadsheet. You have a pricing sheet and then you have a conversion table. We're going to use both of these tabs, and you're going to see on each sheet you have these sections in blue. Those are the sections you need to fill out. If you try to fill out or accidentally try to hit something on a line that's not blue, it's going to tell you that the sheet is password protected and you can't do anything with it. So that just helps make sure that you don't actually take out one of these formulas and mess up how the sheet works. So I always start here and I put a description of the bag. So let's say that we're going to make an alley B. And in my standard alley B, there is an exterior slip pocket, an interior slip pocket, and an interior zipper pocket. So anything over and above that the customer wants is going to go down here in the special features section, which we'll get to in a minute. I always list out what the hardware color is. So if I ever have to go back to this for reference, I'll remember what I've done. So underneath this section right here, you're going to put all of the hardware that you used in the bag. Now, if you have purchased a hardware kit, that'll be easy. You'll have one line with $1 amount and you'll be done with it. But if not, then you're going to have to list out each thing. So let's go ahead and take the long way around and list out each thing. We know we have a D ring, and let's say we paid 50 cents for that. We have a rectangle ring. And let's say we paid 50 cents for that as well. We have a swivel clasp, $1 for it. A strap adjuster, paid $1.25. We have grommets, 8 of those, and say for 8 of them we paid $10. We have a concho. Let's say the customer picked out this really fabulous concho and it cost you $5 for it. Now, in addition to listing all of the hardware, I also add a line for miscellaneous. And that miscellaneous is going to be things like rivets, edge paint, that type of stuff that it is so minute, it is hard to track, but it is a real cost to us. And I usually just put a standard $2.50 in there. If the group of miscellaneous items exceeds that, then I'm going to go back and take a look at what's in it and start listing out those items separately. So you'll see here the total hardware cost is $20.75. The next thing, or the next two things on the spreadsheet, is the exterior and the lining. So we're going to pop over here to the conversion table and we're going to start listing out all of our materials. So the first thing is we're going to use vinyl. We paid $20 for it. And the vinyl that I'm using is 18 by 54. So you will see in column F right here, it is calculating out how much that roll of vinyl is per square inch. What you need to do in these two columns is list out how much you used. So in this case, I'm going to say I used the entire thing. I used the entire 18 by 54. So you'll see the total cost for the bag for the vinyl is $20, which is what I paid for it. Let's assume that we're going to use cotton canvas for the outside. And the cotton canvas, I paid $17.25 for it. It was per yard, so it's 36 inches instead of the 18, and it is 54 inches wide. Now, for the alley B, I only used, let's say, half a yard. So I'm going to say I used 18 by 54, and it's going to calculate the price or the cost at a half yard, which is $8.63. So because I'm using cotton canvas, I had to use interfacing on the outside of the bag. Let's say that my interfacing cost $5 a yard, so it's going to be 36 inches, but the interfacing is only 45 inches wide. So I'm going to put 45 here. On the interfacing, instead of using half a yard, I had to use a little bit more because it's not as wide. And let's say that number is, I used 24 inches of the 45-inch wide fabric or interfacing. I also used a stabilizer, and the main stabilizer was Decoville Heavy in the Alley B, and that is $5 for a yard. Actually, Decoville Heavy is a little more, so let's say Decoville Heavy is $7.50 a yard. So a yard is 36. Again, this is 45 inches wide. Now, sometimes interfacing stabilizers are 20 inches wide, so you got to watch that. On this, let's say that I just used half a yard. So I'm going to put 18 by 45, and my cost for the Decoville Heavy is $3.75. On the Decoville Light, Alley B only uses a very small amount. So I paid $5 for, and understand these numbers, some of these numbers I'm just pulling out of the air, they're not real. We're just using them as examples. I only used 2 inches of this and the full 45-inch width. Now, let's say I didn't use a whole, let's just use an example. Let's say I only used 30 inches. That means I have a little section of Decoville Light left over I can use on another project. Okay, so the width doesn't always have to be the entire width, just assuming for this example that it is. Okay, so now what we've done here is we have totaled the amount of our cost for the items for the exterior of the bag, which in this case is $35.89. So now let's move on to the lining. Let's say that we used linen for the lining, and the price per yard is, linen is 55 inches wide. Whoops, I'm off the thing. It's not 36, it's $17.25. And it is half a yard, and excuse me, that's per yard, so it's 36 by 55. So it cost me $17.25 for a full yard of linen. But I only used half a yard. So this is where my 18 inches comes into play, and I use the full width. Then because it is lining, we use some some interfacing. I'm going to put on the interfacing. I paid $5 for it. That's 36 by 45. And I actually used 24 inches of it by 45. The other thing I used on the interior is a zipper. And the zipper I bought in, let's say I paid $10 for it, and I bought 3 yards of it. So it's going to be the 108. And because zipper doesn't really have a width, just use the number 1 there. And I'm using 7 inches of that zipper tape. So now my total cost for the lining is $12.61. Now, as I put that zipper on there, I realized over here on my pricing sheet, I forgot to add the zipper pull. Let's add that on there. Let's say I paid $2.50 for the zipper pull. You gotta make sure that you include everything in this bag. So under the exterior and the lining, you'll see in these two lines in column B that it carried over the amounts from the conversion table. So the $35.89 and $12.61 for the lining has now carried over to this main page. Special features. Let's say my customer wants a key fob, and I don't typically put a key fob in a bag, which I usually do, but let's just use it as an example. I know for my key fob, I'm going to need a 1/2-inch swivel clip and a little bit of extra fabric, just, maybe 10 inches. So I'm just going to say my standard key fob price is $2.50. Whoops. Is $2.50. And then let's say they want an extra slip pocket. And my standard price for an extra zip pocket is $5. So as we look down here, we're going to see that the total cost, our total cost, that's direct cost for the bag is $79.25. Now, this multiplier, this is what represents our overhead cost. So remember, that includes our time in making the bag. It includes our machine costs, including maintenance, oil, whatever supplies go into the machines. It includes depreciation of the machines. It includes overhead as in electricity, whatever utilities you have running to your building. You may have some staff that's in there, payroll taxes, some advertising, whatever your costs are. In my case, in my part of the country, I'm going to say that the South typically has a lesser cost of living. So my multiplier may be lower than somebody who, say, lives in New York City, because my rent's going to be lower, my utility is going to be lower, the price of my labor, if I have to hire somebody, is going to be lower. So the multiplier is kind of that number and that amount that we can't give you exactly what it should be. But what I encourage you to do is to keep track of your costs and get some idea of what your overhead costs are, and it's going to help you make sure that you're charging enough. Now, if you make 100 bags in a year, then you may be able to not charge as much overhead per bag as compared to if you make 2 bags a year. Your idea is to cover your overhead costs. So in my area, I typically use a multiplier of 2. And what that means is it's going to, my overhead costs, which is, again, includes my time, my 4 hours making the bag, as well as all the other things involved, comes to $158.50, which is double the total cost. So essentially, it's your total cost 3 times that amount, which comes to the $237.75. Now, if I'm making a bag for my mom or my best friend or somebody special in my life, maybe I don't charge them any overhead. Maybe I just eat my overhead. And in that case, I would have a multiplier of 0. And all I would do is charge them the total actual direct costs in the bag. So I would say at a minimum, you try to get that multiplier up as high as you can. 2 is probably a standard for our industry, but if you live in an area where you can charge 3, go for it. So in this case, my Alley B bag for this customer, I'm going to charge them $237.75. This spreadsheet can be a real eye-opener because typically people don't charge enough for their products. And for those of you who don't know, I was a CPA for 30 years in practice, and I had these conversations with my clients all the time. Most people don't charge enough. So go through this exercise, figure out exactly what your overhead costs are, and make sure you're treating yourself fairly and you're getting what you deserve for making these bags. Now, this spreadsheet is available on my website. You can go to simplyclassic.net. I'll link it all down below. Now, one thing I do suggest is that you save this per customer. So what I will do is go to File, Save As,
I'm going to go to this PC. Let's just say I create a new folder under my section here called finished bags or price per bag or something like that. And then when you get into that folder, let's just say that this particular bag is for Murphy, the Murphy bag, Chris Murphy. And I'm going to save that. So now whenever I need to, somebody says, oh, I saw Chris Murphy's bag, I love it, I want the same thing, you're going to be able to go ahead and pull this up. Now, if you want to make notes as to what kind of vinyl you use, maybe what pattern, what print, what color cotton canvas, you can certainly do that on here and kind of have this be a full spectrum worksheet for you. And I do suggest to do that. Maybe go ahead to this conversion table and make notes in here. If you have a situation where you make a bag that has got more items in it than what it is showing on these conversion tables, you can certainly update this spreadsheet. And I'm going to tell you to do that. You just go to the review and you click on, you click on unprotect sheet. And when you click on unprotect sheet, it's going to allow you to add rows if you need to. See, I added a row there. I can copy my formulas down. And when you're done, I suggest you go ahead and click protect sheet again, because if not, if you accidentally hit on one of these, you're going to change your formula without meaning to, and then you might be in trouble. Make a copy of the sheet, have like a master copy, and then you can go back to it, make a copy for each one of your customers. Just kind of keep using it, but keep your master copy clean with nothing on it, and just open it up. Go ahead and save it, name it the name of your customer, and enter your information in there, and then you should be good to go.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Bagmaker's Workroom. I hope that we help take some of the mystery out of how much to charge for your bags. Now, if you're not a bag maker, if you make garments or window treatments, bed skirts, whatever it is you make, you can certainly use those same principles and apply them to whatever your craft is. Next time, we are going to look at a few inspiration photos, and then I'm going to show you how to take a photo of a designer bag and translate that to a bag for yourself using the same proportions. So until next time, happy sewing.